Hey, welcome to DotVVM Minutes. Today I will be playing with Azure Functions and show you how to consume your functions from DotVVM. Okay, so I have a sample application here. You can see these photos and you can click on the Buy Now, display some description, and you can also rate the photos. And because this application doesn't have a SQL database or anything like that, and I need to store the ratings somewhere, why not to use the Azure Functions? Because you can save the ratings, for example, to the table storage, and you can create a simple API which you can call to determine the rating of the product and also to submit a new rating from the user. So when I click here, for example, 4 stars, then I will get this rating. And this little tiny widget is powered by Azure Functions. So as you can see, I have a few resources in my Azure account, in my Azure subscription. One of this is DotVVM Minutes demo, and this icon means that it's Azure Functions. And this is a storage account where I'm using table storage for storing the information about user ratings. And there's also an application insights resource, which is not important right now, and some app service plan. I'm using consumption-based app service plan, which means that I'm built only for the calls to the individual Azure functions, so it's not expensive at all. And unless I would have millions of executions of these functions, I will be paying practically nothing. So when I open the table in the table storage, it's very simple. It looks like this. The first key is partition key, and there is a row key. In Azure Table Storage, you have always 2 keys. One is the partition, and second is the row key. If you don't have millions of products, you don't need to use the partition key at all. You can just use the row key. So this is the ID of my product. There is also a timestamp which is generated automatically. It's the date of the last change of this row, and I'm storing number of ratings and the total rating of the product. When I add an additional rating, for example 5 stars, and I refresh the table, you can see that this was updated. And basically when I need to read the rating, I just find the row with this row key and you use 9 divide by number of ratings. So 4.5, that's the result, that's the average rating from all of the users. So this is the table storage. It's very simple. I'm just storing 2 numbers for each product. And here's my Azure Functions project. This one, I have just said something like new project, and I have selected that I want Azure Functions project. And basically, this is the definition of my table storage entity. So it derives from table entity, and you can see those 2 columns. And this is my function class, which basically contains, this is a helper function, but it basically contains 2 functions. Get rating for a product. So you will pass a product ID and you will get the rating for the product. And rate product, which allows you to submit a rating for a product. So just 2 functions. Both functions are available using HTTP. So you can use the get request to rating / product ID, and this function will be called. And you can also post to rating / product ID, and it will submit a new rating for the product. So it's very simple to consume, very simple to play with. And the implementation is also quite similar. It's also quite simple because here is my reviews table. It uses a lazy initialization and also it's async await, so I'm returning a task of cloud table. And when I call this reviews table for the first time, this factory method will be called. So I'm loading my configuration, the settings JSON file, and I'm looking for storage connection string. I will open a cloud storage account and create a cloud table client. And then I will find the table which is called product reviews, and if it doesn't exist, this application will automatically create it. That's why I'm using await, and that's why I'm returning task of cloud table. And the lazy class, it will make sure that this initializer method is called only once. I have also a helper method here, get rating for product core. It only it gets the product ID, it will get the table and find a row with the row key equal to product ID. And if it's not there, when we will just return null. Yeah, so if the product has never been rated, I will be returning null. Yeah, and it's also async. Okay, when I go back, now if it's null, we will return 0, that the product hasn't been rated at all. And when we have some results, then we will calculate the average rating of the product. Yeah, very simple behavior. And when I need to rate the product, I have the product ID in the URL, and I need to deserialize the body of the request because the value will be passed in the body. Yeah, the number of stars. If somebody will try to send different numbers than from the range between 1 and 5, we will just return bad request. And also I will grab the rating. If it doesn't exist, I will create a new one, setting the row key to product ID to string. It's always a string. And the partition key will be empty string because I'm not using partitions here. Then I will add the number of ratings and total rating, and I will store this. Right now I'm doing insert or replace, which is not thread safe. If I would have millions of users rating the products at the same time, probably some ratings would be lost because it would be overwritten. So if you need to have a high scale application, this is not a good approach because you are incrementing the same row over and over. But for smaller or medium-sized apps, this is just good enough. And also it's just ratings, so if it's not 100% accurate, it's not such a big deal. Yeah, but always be careful when inserting or updating data in the database, and think about the transactions and if they are applicable and if they are necessary for your case. Okay, so basically this is my function application. I can now click on publish and publish it to the Azure. You can also run this locally. The functions runtime is installed together with Visual Studio. So if you press F5 on this project, it will run locally. It will look for the configuration in this file, but it's simple enough. So I have just published this on Azure. So if I look in the portal, you can see that there are two functions, get rating for product and rate product. As I have already said, they are accessible using HTTP, so you can call them safely. We can try that. I have a nice application called Postman. It's very useful when you need to debug your HTTP APIs. So let's try to call our Azure function. So I will get to the get rating for product function to get its URL. It will be displayed here in the portal. Okay, so I can click on get function URL. And so here I have placed my function, my URL, and the product ID was 10. Yeah, so I can send the request. And I got 4.5. It's basically it's in JSON, but since I'm returning only a number, then it's just the number, nothing at all, nothing else. If I want to get a rating for a product I have never rated, which is, for example, the product with ID 11, you can see that I will be returning 0. In that case, we shouldn't display the rating in the application because it's not a real rating. It's just that we don't have any data right now. Yeah, so that's 0. If I want to submit a new rating, I can switch to post, and let's submit a rating for the product with number 11. Yeah, and I need to set a header. Content type will be application JSON, yeah, but still I'm also posting just a number. So I will just post, for example, 4, rating 4. So I can send this now, and as you can see, we are getting no response, but the status is 200 OK, which means that everything is nice right now. Yeah, everything is correct. Okay, and if I look in the table and the storage, so you can see there is a new row, number of ratings is 1, and total rating is 4, because I have submitted number 4. Yeah, so the functions work in our case. And now we can use this simple HTTP API from DotVVM. DotVVM 2.0 announced a new feature called REST API Bindings, which allow you to consume HTTP APIs directly from DotVVM markup. Yeah, so if you look at this page, product detail, that's the structure of our detail page. Yeah, so there's image, some text, and the reviews. And I'm using Bootstrap, so I have a row, first column with the image, second column with the description, and third column with our reviews control. And to separate that from the rest of the page, I've created a user control for that. So this is our ratings control. And basically, I'm displaying the rating of the product. Yeah, so this is this batch. Also, it's styled using the batch class, so it looks like this in the Bootstrap. And then I'm just drawing these stars. I'm using the Unicode character here, so you can see that it's a star. And what's interesting here is this variable called functions, because I have a variable in binding which is called functions, and I'm calling getRating for product, which is the name of the Azure function. And I'm passing some parameters, the product ID, which I have in my view model. It's basically read from the URL. Yeah, if I press F12, yeah, it's going here from the route. So it will just take this number and pass it to the function. And this is visible only when this value is greater than 0. And here I'm displaying the rating. And I can also, for the rating, I can also say functions rate product. And also I'm passing product ID and the rating. What's interesting here, notice that I'm going from 5 to 1 because CSS, I'm using CSS for turning the stars from blue to red color. And because of how the selectors are written, I need to reverse the order of the elements, but this is 1 and this is 5. If you're curious how this works, you can look here. I'm using this selector, which will basically say take all stars from the 1 I'm hovering over and to the first element of the star. And because it cannot do the opposite direction, I need to reverse the order of the stars. Yeah, I'm switching the direction to right to left. This is a little hack, but CSS has some limitations which I couldn't solve using other method. I would need to use JavaScript if I wouldn't want to switch the direction. So but basically for us it's important that I'm using static command because I don't need to send the entire view model to the Azure Functions. They wouldn't know what to do with that. I'm just sending these parameters and I need to submit the rating. So that's it. How does DotVVM know about these functions, getRating for product and rate product? There is one necessary step which you need to do if you want to consume a REST API. You need to have a Swagger definition. Sometimes it's called Open API definition of the API. So I have this file. If you, for example, use ASP.NET MVC Core to create your REST API, there is a library called Swashbuckle, which can generate this for you. This is a description of the API. I'm saying here that I have this URL in my API. It accepts the GET request, the GET command, and consumes JSON, returns JSON, and it has some parameters. Product ID, which is in the path, it's type integer, and things like that. Basically, this is a documentation for the API. It's some metadata, and you can generate a client based on this metadata. Yeah, so what you need is this Swagger definition. Unfortunately, Azure Functions in version 2 cannot generate this for you, so you need to do it manually, but they are planning to add this feature to Azure Functions, so hopefully next month this will be available. And if you're building your own API, it's not an issue. You can just generate this file from the API using some library. There is also a very nice tool which is called Editor Swagger IO, which you can use to validate your Swagger metadata. Yeah, so I can paste this YAML here, and you can see that we have two methods in our API, and it accepts the product ID and it returns something. Yeah, so that's for it. Then you can say file, save, convert and save as JSON, because the .vvm tooling needs JSON, and most of the libraries also produces JSON, not YAML, which is used in this tool. So that's let's hope that's not confusing. Okay, so I have somehow created the Swagger JSON. Either it can be generated by some tools or I can create it manually. But this is the metadata .vvm needs for allowing you to consume your HTTP APIs from the markup. Yeah, so I have this file, and to introduce the functions variable, I need to run this command in command line. Yeah, .vvm from version 2, we have a .vvm CLI, which is a command line tool which supports some functionality of .vvm. It can create the pages and master pages and things like that from the command line. And also it can create definitions for REST API bindings. So I can say .NET.vvm API create, and then I need to pass a few parameters. So first one is the path to the Swagger JSON file. The second one is the name of the C# client, which will be generated, including the namespace. So I'm saying .vvm minutes simple shop API. It's the name of the class that will be generated. And the name of the file, I want to place it. So this is API client.cs. And also .vvm needs to generate a TypeScript version of the client, so it can be called directly from the web browser. Yeah, so you will get two clients, one for C# and you can use it to communicate with the API from the server-side code. And also you will get a TypeScript client, which will be used from the client side. So this is the path to the TypeScript file. Yeah, so I have already run this, so I don't need to rerun it again. But this information is stored in this .vvm.json file. Yeah, so here are the paths and all the settings. You can also change that and say .vvm .net.vvm API regenerate, which will regenerate the API definitions. So if you change your Swagger JSON, you can just regenerate the clients from it. Yeah, and basically this generated this API client file. So that's the generated file. Yeah, you can see there is a client, and there are some functions like get rating for product and also the rate product. Yeah, so this is generated. You don't need to write this code. And also we have a TypeScript version, which is here. And basically it's the same, but it's in TypeScript. So get ratings for product and rate product. These functions will be called from the page when you click on the stars. Yeah. So basically that's it. And the last piece of this puzzle is in .vvm Startup. you need to call config register API client and bind these classes together. So I'm saying this C# client is equivalent to the client which can be found here in JavaScript. This is the URL for my API. Typically you will read this from the configuration, and the last parameter is name of the variable which will be available in the bindings and which will allow you to consume this API. Yeah, so this is how you register the underscore functions variable. Yeah, so I can say underscore functions. You can see we have IntelliSense for that, and you can also have these functions. Yeah, so you even have IntelliSense for this, and this is quite simple to use. And the last thing, because these functions have the same URL, the rate product and get rating for product, if you look at the URLs of these functions, maybe in the Postman, you can see that the URL is the same. I've just changed get and post. Yeah. So DotVVM automatically refreshes this function when this is called. Yeah, because it assumes that if you post some new data to this URL, then you need to get the new version automatically. So as you can see, when I click the stars, you will see that there will be several requests. There should be 2, but actually there will be 3 because of the cross-origin resource sharing, CORS. Let's see. Yeah, so the first request, it's options HTTP method, which may look quite strange, but because this function is on another domain, yeah, I'm on localhost here, and this is running on different domain, then the browser will make sure that this API allows the cross-domain calls. By default, this is turned off, and you need to turn this on in the Azure portal. If you look here, you can see that I have a CORS rules. This is cross-origin resource sharing, and I have allowed all domains. Any domain can call this HTTP API. Yeah, so if it doesn't work for you, if you get some errors in the console, make sure that you have turned on CORS and listed your domain or just any domain here. Yeah. So this is the first. This is some invisible request. Basically, the browser makes sure that this domain accepts requests from other domains like localhost. So this is not important. But this first request, or the second request, is post, which is I'm posting my value. You can see the request payload was 5, so because I've clicked on this star. So I'm sending the HTTP post. And because .vvm has some bindings on the same URL with HTTP GET, it will refresh these bindings automatically. So if you do a post, all the gets on the same URL will be triggered automatically. So it will trigger this get, and the response is 4.75. So you can see we have 4.8 because it's rounded. Yeah, so this is refreshed automatically. So when I call this 1 star, you can also see the options and post and the get, which happens automatically. Yeah, so I will get new value. And also this function is called twice. This is in the visible binding, and also I'm displaying a text, but .vvm just caches the value. So if you use the same function call with the same parameters, then it's called only once, because .vvm can share the response between 2 bindings. And if you need to refresh these things, you can just post to the URL, or you have another ways of refreshing these bindings. You can also say API, and there should be something like refresh on change or refresh on event. So if there was a way to change the product ID, I can say refresh on change, and then list the product ID. And when this observable would be changed, this would be called again. This would be refreshed. You can also refresh on event, and you can then say something like trigger event, which you can basically, which you can trigger some events. So you can create your own event, for example, refresh rating, and you can say API refresh on event refresh rating. And here you could see, you could use something like API push event and say refresh rating. Yeah, but you don't need to, because this happens automatically because of the URL, which is the same. If it's not the same, you need to do this. If you are interested in more information about REST API bindings, make sure you look in the documentation. It's described here. You can use REST API bindings for these simple scenarios like rating of products, or you can use it, for example, in combo box to fill the items of the combo box. The great thing on REST API bindings is that you can use caching. So for example, if you have millions of pages in your application and you need to have a combo box with a list of countries, you can use REST API binding for this, and you can set up caching on the HTTP level. So the browser will not call this API over and over, because it will know that this is valid for 1 year, because frankly, it's not, new countries don't emerge every day. So you can safely cache this value. And you can, of course, call another methods like post or put or delete from the buttons using static command binding, which is also great because you can just call an API. And if there are some GET requests on the same URL, they will be refreshed automatically. You can also fill grid views or repeaters with the REST API bindings. So play with REST API bindings and send us your feedback and your ideas, and if you like this feature or not, because it's one of the nicest things we have added in DotVVM 2.0. Okay, see you next time.